So I'll try to add something. I did mention in my talk that the first 2 phases of my career, I did mention the third one, and I guess I can now tell a story about Doc where he was wrong. So one of the things that, I have a PhD minor in art history, which is a bit unusual. And when I was working with Doc and told him I wanted to do this, he told me, quote, "You will make yourself unhireable." That didn't turn out to be true, fortunately. But so I did 2 stints of doing engineering type things, and a couple of years ago I decided I was going to try to bring signal processing to art history. And so how did I go about doing that with modest success at this stage, because I'm only a couple of years in. And this would work in all kinds of other applications. We've heard a lot of talk about how LMS was taken to various applications in various forms. John mentioned a few, and Lloyd also talked about the antenna problem. One of the things, and again, if you write papers on LMS, I've seen reviews, please not another paper on LMS, okay? So LMS is one of these tools that now everybody uses, so you can teach it to undergrads. What you need to do is go find an application where nobody's ever thought that they needed any of these tools. Now, admittedly, the tool has to be the right one. You can't walk around with a hammer always looking for a nail. But basically what happens is when we do engineering among ourselves as academics or researchers, we're trying to impress our colleagues. So in other words, if you walk into a new problem and all of what happens is part of the application rather than the algorithmic theory that you think you're special at, you're not going to be able to impress your colleagues, and so you're going to choose not to work on that problem because it looks like a simple application of LMS or something like that. And I'm here to tell you that that's really a mistake, because what you've got to do is learn the engineering culture, and you'll find that engineers choose problems to impress other people like them. And if you actually make up your mind not to worry about that and go after an application where you were impressing the people in the application area, even though you were bringing stuff to them that you knew was pretty basic, it's just that they never thought of applying it that way before, you can actually have an enormous transformative effect on that new field. And even though the technology that you brought is simplistic, it's the one that changes the rules. After that, other people will come behind you and figure out how to make it more sophisticated and so on and so forth. And they'll be the ones, I guess this is still back to the metaphor of blazing the trail, but it's not quite as hard that way as if you know how to use a machete and you go to a place where they need trails and they've never seen a machete. You whip out your machete and you make a trail in a big hurry and they go, wow, how did you do that? So I guess that's the one rule that I would try to apply, is that if you're looking for application areas where engineers have never been before, and don't worry about doing something that to other engineers looks incredibly simplistic. I feel that part of our calling is actually to engineer. What does that mean? That means to go in and to do something, to organize it, to put a methodology to it so that it becomes easier to do, or faster to do, or cheaper to do. So look for applications where we haven't been so far. And I think you'll find that you can use easy engineering and you can make breakthroughs that will power your career.
Incidentally, you do. Do you know that? About every 90 minutes, the brain goes into dream sleep. That lasts for about roughly like a half hour. So you do this several times throughout this sleeping during nighttime. During the dream sleep is, I think, when the mind is most creative. And most of the time you wake up in the morning and you don't realize you've been dreaming, but you haven't. Everybody dreams. The only way you know you've been dreaming is if you wake up in the morning and you happen to be right in the middle of the dream, and then you know. But other than that, I think I'm not being able to give you a very clear idea of how to effectively implement a creative process. It's just catch as catch can. Hope for the best. Lead a good life. Take nice long walks.
Well, for me, I think the most helpful area is to be insatiably curious and want to know things, and don't take the word of an authority as an answer to your question unless you can verify it yourself. If I give an example, at one point I was curious about how well two resistors on an integrated circuit would match if they were printed side by side. And I went to Intel's expert in the process, and he said, not very well. And I said, I don't care how bad it is, but I'd like to know a number. Give me a percentage. Well, then he admitted he didn't know. Well, how do you do it? Well, it turned out Intel had some test wafers. They didn't have resistors printed side by side, but there were like die positions about 100 mils wide, and each one had one resistor on it. So I set up and measured the resistors. And sure enough, they didn't match exactly. But the thing I noticed, there was a nice smooth gradient across the wafer. So I did a plot and then figured out if that was a smooth line, how much did the resistors deviate from the line, which would give me an idea what would happen if they were printed close together. And it turned out they would be within 0.5%. Now I had precision resistors available, and that was one of the things I used in that first codec design. And it was actually one of the patents issued was on that design. But if I had just taken the answer, not very good, I wouldn't have helped. The other thing is, you've got to be a salesman. And somebody once said, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. It's absolutely not true unless you are as good a salesman as you are an inventor, because you've got to sell the idea. And even everybody looks back and says, well, the microprocessor was so obvious. It was probably harder to sell it. We had to sell it to the customer. Then I had to sell it to Intel's marketing people, who were terrified that if the company goes into the computer business, our customers for memory, big computer companies, would go to our competition instead. We had to point out this was a different class of computing even than what those customers were. And it turned out everybody else involved in the microprocessor was selling it as well. So those are two things: curiosity and salesmanship.